The mountain cowboy had seen storms that could freeze rivers, men who could survive without food for days, and battles that left even the strongest cowboys speechless. But nothing prepared him for the sight of a pregnant widow alone on a broken road, desperately pushing a heavy wagon through the snow while protecting the one thing she had left, her unborn child. When he finally stopped beside her and said, "Get in my wagon," he had no idea that helping a stranger would uncover a secret buried for years and change both of their lives forever. Before we begin this emotional frontier story, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Meaningful Horizons for more unforgettable Wild West stories. The winter of 1879 had arrived earlier than anyone expected in the remote mountains of Colorado. Snow covered the endless valleys, frozen winds cut through the trees, and every road became a dangerous path where only the strongest dared to travel. Deep in those lonely mountains lived a quiet cowboy named Caleb Stone. Unlike the loud and reckless men who filled the frontier towns, Caleb was a man of few words. He spent most of his days alone, taking care of his small ranch hidden between the mountains. Life had taught him one painful lesson: sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who leave the deepest scars. For years, Caleb had avoided getting close to anyone. He had lost his family when he was young, and later watched his closest friend betray him over land. Since then, he believed a lonely life was safer than another broken heart. But on one freezing afternoon, as he rode his horse along an old mountain trail, he saw something that made him stop. In the distance, a wooden wagon was stuck in deep snow. A woman stood beside it, struggling with all her strength to move the heavy wheels. Her coat was old and torn, her face was pale from exhaustion, and one hand rested protectively over her pregnant belly. Caleb watched for a moment. The storm was getting worse. No traveler could survive that cold night alone. The woman pushed the wagon again, but it barely moved. Tears formed in her eyes, not because of the cold, but because she knew she was running out of time. "My baby, just hold on a little longer," she whispered. Caleb slowly rode closer. The woman turned around quickly, frightened by the sound of approaching hoofbeats. She stepped back, preparing herself for another disappointment. Many people had passed her that day. Some looked away, some refused to help, but Caleb stopped his horse beside her. "What are you doing out here alone?" he asked. The woman lowered her eyes. "I'm just trying to reach the next town." "In this storm?" She didn't answer. Caleb looked at the broken wagon wheel, then at her exhausted face. He understood immediately. She wasn't going to make it. "You need to leave this wagon," he said. The woman shook her head. "I can't." "You can't, no," she replied softly. "Everything I own is inside." Caleb looked into the wagon. There were only a few blankets, a small bag of clothes, and a wooden box held tightly in the corner. "That's all you have?" The woman nodded. For a moment, Caleb remembered his own past, the feeling of losing everything, the fear of having nowhere to go. He climbed down from his horse and walked toward her, and he said the words that would change both their futures. "Get in my wagon." The woman stared at him. "I don't even know your name," she said. "Caleb Stone." She hesitated. "I'm Clara Whitmore." Caleb helped her into his wagon while the storm grew stronger around them. He wrapped an extra blanket around her shoulders and carefully placed her belongings inside. As they traveled toward his ranch, Clara remained silent. She kept looking at Caleb, trying to understand why a stranger would risk his own safety for someone he had never met. Finally, she asked, "Why did you help me?" Caleb looked ahead at the snowy trail. "Because someone should have helped me once." Those words surprised Clara. She realized there was a sadness behind his eyes that he tried to hide. When they arrived at the ranch, Clara expected a small shelter for one night. She never expected the warm fireplace, the peaceful cabin, either kindness of a man who had spent years pretending he had no heart. But Caleb also didn't know that Clara was carrying a secret connected to the very land he owned. That night, while the wind screamed outside, Clara opened the wooden box she had protected all day. Inside was an old letter with a name written across it, Caleb Stone. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "I never thought I would find you." And before morning arrived, Caleb would discover that the pregnant widow he rescued was not a stranger at all. She was the missing piece of a mystery that had haunted his family for 20 years. The morning's sun slowly appeared over the frozen mountains, painting the snow-covered land with golden light. For the first time in many days, the storm had disappeared, but inside Caleb Stone's small cabin, a different kind of storm was beginning. Caleb stood near the fireplace, he staring at the woman sitting quietly at his table. Clara Whitmore looked exhausted, but there was something else in her eyes, a fear she was trying desperately to hide. He had noticed the wooden box she carried. He had noticed how carefully she protected it, and now he knew there was something inside that box connected to him. "Clara," Caleb said calmly, "why was my name written on that letter?" Her hands tightened around the old paper. For a moment she said nothing. Then she took a deep breath. "Because your father knew my father." Caleb froze. "My father," he repeated. Clara nodded slowly. "His name was Thomas Whitmore. 20 years ago, he worked with your family on the mountain ranch." Caleb stepped closer. Memories from his childhood began returning. He remembered his father talking about a man named Thomas, a loyal friend who disappeared after a terrible argument over stolen land records. "My father told me that someone betrayed him," Caleb said. Clara looked down. "He was blamed for something he didn't do." The room became silent. Caleb had spent years believing the story he was told. He believed his father's closest friend had abandoned him. But now, this widow was telling him everything he knew might have been a lie. "What happened?" Caleb asked. Clara opened the wooden box and pulled out the old letter. "My father wrote this before he disappeared. He said he discovered someone was trying to steal your family's land. He found proof, but before he could tell your father, he was attacked and forced to leave." Caleb took the letter with shaking hands. As he read the faded words, his expression changed. The letter revealed that Thomas Whitmore had tried to protect Caleb's family, not hurt them. For 20 years, Caleb had carried anger toward an innocent man, and Clara had been carrying the truth all this time. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Caleb asked. Tears filled Clara's eyes. "Because I was afraid." "Afraid of me?" "No," she whispered, "afraid that the truth would bring more pain." Caleb looked at her, then he noticed something else. "You said your husband died?" Clara nodded. Her husband was searching for the same answers. He found out the truth about the land records, but before he could reveal it, he never came home. The room fell quiet again. Caleb finally understood. Clara wasn't just a widow lost in a snowstorm. She was a woman who had spent years chasing the same truth he had unknowingly been searching for his entire life. Over the next few days, Caleb helped Clara recover. He repaired her wagon, cared for her horses, and prepared a small room in the cabin for when the baby arrived. At first both of them were strangers, but slowly, something changed. Caleb noticed Clara's kindness. She noticed his patience. The lonely ranch that once felt empty began to feel like a home. One evening, while sitting beside the fireplace, Clara smiled. "You know, when you stopped that day, I thought you were just another mountain cowboy." Caleb smiled slightly. "And now? Now I think you were the answer to a prayer I was too tired to say." For the first time in years Caleb laughed, but their peaceful days did not last forever. One afternoon, a stranger arrived at the ranch, a wealthy businessman named Victor Hale. He claimed he owned the land surrounding Caleb's ranch. But Caleb recognized him immediately. He was the man connected to the old betrayal. Victor looked at Clara and said, "You should have stayed away from this place." Caleb stepped forward. "You know her?" Victor smiled coldly. "I know the secrets she carries." The truth was finally coming out. Victor had spent years hiding what he had done. He had taken advantage of old friendships, stolen documents, and destroyed families to gain power. But now Caleb and Clara had proof. With the help of the town sheriff, the stolen records were uncovered. Victor's lies were exposed, and the land that belonged to Caleb's family was finally protected. Months later, spring arrived in the mountains, the snow melted, flowers grew around the ranch, and Clara welcomed her baby into the world. Caleb stood beside her, holding the newborn child with a smile he thought he would never have again. He had spent years believing he was meant to live alone. But the day he saw a struggling widow beside a broken wagon, everything changed. He didn't just rescue Clara from a snowstorm, she rescued him from a life without hope. Years later, people in the nearby town still told the story of the mountain cowboy who stopped on a frozen road and said 4 simple words. "Get in my wagon," because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can lead to the greatest changes. If this emotional Wild West story touched your heart, remember to like this video and subscribe to Meaningful Horizons for more unforgettable frontier stories. The end.